Good evening, everyone. Welcome in to Vols Society Live on this Tuesday night. My name is David Morrison from the Vols Society, here to bring you another episode of Vols Society Live. This is your show. This is the fan show. This is for our Vols Society followers and our University of Tennessee football fans or basketball fans or whatever fans you may be of. This is your show. You're watching us live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. Leave your comments, your questions. I will read your comments, your questions, give shout outs, talk about what's on your mind tonight. In the title of the video, we're going to recap the 2023 Tennessee football regular season. Obviously, we have a bowl game coming up later on, this month or maybe early next month. But we're going to talk about just kind of the good, the bad, the ugly of the regular season, and this is where you can chime in and give your thoughts and your opinions of it. We're also we'll dive into some Tennessee basketballs. We got two big basketball games for the men's and women's team as they are participating in the inaugural SEC versus ACC challenge tomorrow, and we'll talk about that as we head off the air. But let's go ahead and dive into the show tonight. Uh, Obviously, Tennessee finished out the regular season with an 8-4 record with a 48-24 victory over the Vanderbilt Commodores. As I go ahead and pull up these stats here really quick. Like I said, I was up there at Neyland Stadium on Saturday. Hello to Phil watching along, saying hi, David and Brad. Like I said, I was up at Neyland Stadium on Saturday, watched Tennessee defeat Vanderbilt 48-24. I thought it was a nice game for the Volunteers for the most part. Really happy mainly for the seniors. A lot of seniors contribute in this game. Joe Milton, arguably had his best game of the season. Hello to my grandparents watching along. Joe Milton, in my opinion, probably had his best game of the season. Obviously, with senior day, it was a nice touch there. Tracy watching along says it was a nice last home game. Absolutely. But Joe Milton on the day, 22 for 33, 383 yards, 4 touchdowns. He also had 2 rushing touchdowns off of 5 carries for 11 yards. So, hey, Milton did what he had to do. Was a nice win for him. Really for the team in general, I should say. But, it's just kind of a nice send-off win for the seniors in general. And, give some shout-outs to some seniors. Ramel Keaton, 4 catches, 122 yards, 2 touchdowns, averaged 30 yards per catch. So very nice for Keaton. Jacob Warren had 3 catches, 82 yards and a touchdown. And I remember when he got that touchdown, both him and Keaton were both wide open in the end zone. So, nice to see the hometown kid, Jacob Warren, in his final game at Neyland Stadium getting a touchdown. McCalla Castles also had a touchdown in the game. It was just a nice send off of the seniors and just a positive win to end the season. Obviously beating Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt coming into that contest at the time 2-9, now 2-10, and we all saw what happened in the game. The frustration building up pretty much throughout the whole season and just lashed out on us and had that kind of a scary situation right before the half, but and with the pushing and the shoving, and thankfully there was no big fight. It was just more just verbal and pushing and shoving. And watching the Missouri Arkansas game that Friday afternoon, and there was some punches thrown. Whenever I saw that when I saw that happening, I was thinking, please don't throw a punch on anybody on Tennessee, because when you throw a punch, that's an automatic 1-game suspension, and that would be in the bowl game. Tracy says, the rest didn't control the game. Yeah, they just kind of let it free for all, and when you have these big rivalry games, emotions are going to play a factor, and it's going to escalate, and you're going to have a lot of this pushing and shoving and kind of a ugly scene for a little bit. But, the referees, didn't really control it that well. And as a matter of fact, there was some wacky, offsetting calls really against us quite a bit. So it was kind of ugly, but like I said, Tennessee ended up pulling away with the victory over Vanderbilt. And now we will sit and wait and find out Sunday afternoon, Sunday night, where Tennessee is going to play in the postseason. Obviously, I've mentioned this the last couple of weeks on Ball Society Live. From what I'm hearing, and it seems like now everybody's kind of picking up, it seems like it could be a trip to Jacksonville for the Gator Bowl. And it looks like they are very interested in not only us, but North Carolina. North Carolina's coming off a loss Saturday to NC State. And I believe they may be 8-4 as well, if I'm not mistaken. So, interesting game if it does come to fruition. Uh, you know, a return trip back to Jacksonville. We haven't been there since 2019 when we played Indiana, which was a Tennessee win. So Tennessee's done fairly well at the Gator Bowl in recent years. So, but what should be an interesting matchup if it does happen. I mean, crazier things can happen. I mean, you still got quite a bit of football to go. With championship weekend, obviously Tennessee has no effect with championship weekend, but it does kind of factor in, some of these teams that's in particularly the ACC championship game with Florida State and Louisville. Where does the seeding line up? Obviously, I think both will probably be in a New Year's Six bowl game. Obviously, now Florida State number 4, so it just all kind of balances out, and it's just kind of a waiting game. But the main point is Tennessee is in the postseason. We're going bowling. It's just a matter of who we're bowling against and when we're going to bowl. So uh, I'll go ahead and we'll just kind of go ahead and dive into pretty much throughout the whole season, just kind of my overall thoughts. Obviously, going way back before the season started, Phil says, I think about 10 or 12 of the guys can come back next year because of the COVID years, if not mistaken. Yeah, thank you, Phil, for bringing that up. We had a question, I think, a couple of weeks ago, like who still had a COVID year. And I didn't know at the top of my head. I actually asked somebody, and and off the top of my head, if I can remember correctly, Cooper Mays is one of them. Um, Charles Campbell, the kicker. Brew was, um, I think, a couple of offensive linemen and some defensive linemen, but that's the ones off the top of my head I do remember. And obviously, I'll get a better clarification later on. But and we'll see what happens. Obviously, you got the transfer portal coming up. Also, I believe the first Monday in December. Tracy says that Florida loss was the problem this year. Yeah, absolutely. Going back to the beginning of the season, I probably drank too much Tennessee Kool-Aid, and after that Orange Bowl victory, thinking, man, we're going to be, I wouldn't say run the table, but man, the days of, I don't think we'll see an 8-4 season ever again. I was dumbfounded at the time, but I didn't realize how much talent we lost. But kind of looking back at that Orange Bowl game and how we played, and kind of a preview what we thought this year would be, and just didn't come to fruition. But Tennessee did start the season, blowing out Virginia and Nashville, which feels like that was yesterday, and that was now almost 4 months later. But they blew out Virginia and Nashville, and then the home opener, they had that wild game with Austin P where you had bad officiating, and you had just kind of a wacky game. The offense wasn't clicking at all, and which was pretty much a sign throughout the rest of the season. I mean, Tennessee ended up winning that one 30-13, and then you go to the Swamp, as Tracy mentioned, and you lose to Florida 29-16. Just an ugly game overall. Had an ugly ending by Tennessee, and now Florida is 5-7, not bowl eligible, and here's Tennessee at 8-4, and you have to think, man, you really want to get that Florida game. You wish you could replay that Florida game, and it feels like that's just kind of the same song and dance every year. It's like, especially when Florida has a losing season and we lose a game to them, it's like, I want to replay that Florida game. I want to replay that Florida game, and because the rest of the losses, Alabama and Georgia are playing in Atlanta this Saturday, and then Missouri as a top 10 team, going to play in a New Year's Six bowl game themselves. So, you know, hindsight 2020, those, you hate to get blown out by all three of those opponents, but for the most part, it at least it doesn't look as bad here on November 28th compared to maybe the day we played them. But kind of looking at the rest of the season, Tennessee did get some nice wins at home. They got the revenge over South Carolina, 41-20. Had a nice win against Texas A&M at the time. Uh, it was a 20-13 game, kind of an ugly game, defensive minded game. Both offenses wasn't clicking at all. And but Tennessee does get the win thanks to Dave Williams winning that one for us. And then you go down to Alabama and got the loss. Phil says definitely need to get some different referees next year. Yeah, it's just unreal. The SEC is supposed to be this top football conference, and indeed they are. But man, we got some terrible referees, and it's just and really, the thing with referees, even in the NFL, they get paid nice, but these referees do have Monday to Friday jobs, and they make six figures. And you know, officiating an SEC game or an NFL game is kind of nothing to them, so it doesn't affect them at all. So it's going to be a growing problem, I'm afraid, as the years go on, as it already is for the most part. But getting back to kind of just the rest of the season, Tennessee gets the win at Kentucky on the road, um, which unfortunately is our only road win of the year, because you lost at Florida, lost at Bama, and you lost at Missouri. So yeah, so I mean the road schedule was not favorable to us compared to last year, even though we did lose a couple on the road, but still, uh, just it was a different season. And looking reflected on this season, um, was it a disappointing season? In some ways, yes, but compared to what we've seen in the past with previous coaches, it could have easily been a 5-7 season or a 6-6 season, maybe even 7-5 to a certain degree. But I think we have the right coaching staff. I think Josh Heupel's a great coach. Um, I think we got some good players. We just lost a lot of talent from last year's 11-win season. Hendon Hooker's gone. Jalen Hyatt's gone. Byron Young's gone. Um, the list goes on and on and on. Cedric Tillman, another one. You just lost a lot of great players, and you lost a lot of leadership. And that, to me, the biggest problem I had with this team is just they felt very undisciplined, and especially in losing scenarios where we lose a game and then we're getting into a fight at the end. It happened with Florida, and it happened a little bit with Missouri. Um, maybe, and it's just, and even going back to Vanderbilt, thankfully it was mainly Vanderbilt who's caused a lot of it, but just a lot of dumb penalties and a lot of personal foul penalties. And 3 years in a row now we have just been the most penalized team in the SEC, which is just uncalled for. I mean, some of it we can blame the referees for, but we got to be smarter going forward with our penalties, and that's frustrating. Tracy says, "I believe in Heupel." I believe in Heupel too, Tracy. I think we hit the jackpot, and reflecting back for 3 years now, I think Heupel came in at the right time, and especially with college football changing with Heupel's first year with NIL and with the transfer portal, it was just the perfect scenario for us, and had a surprising first season in 2021, then had the great 2022 season. And this year, is a solid season. Could have been better, but from what we replaced, and it still ended up 8-4, I think is fine. Kind of looking at some stats wise, and I looked this up right before we went on the air. Uh, Compared to the rest of the SEC. So we'll look at individual players. Joe Milton finished seventh in the SEC in passing yardage. So, you know, yeah, obviously the completion percentage is kind of what is going to hurt sorry, hurt Joe Milton. Um, but for the most part, he ended up finishing seventh in the SEC in passing. Uh, Phil's asking, well, don't we have Boo Carter and Matthew coming in next year? Yeah, yeah, we do have some great recruits coming in next year. Um, I got to saw Boo Carter back in August play. Very talented player. I think he can be ready day one. And uh, yeah, we'll probably, and like I said, I wish I could think of all the players off the top of my head who's all coming in. But we'll dive into that once they get on campus and stuff. But yeah, we got some really. I mean, this is where this class coming up for Josh Heupel and the class coming in is going to be a big key factor in where Tennessee's going in the future. Um, Definitely so. But Milton, he finished the season, regular season. Obviously, still got the bowl game, and they do count for the stats. Finished with 2,813 yards passing, 64% completion percentage, 20 touchdowns to 5 interceptions. Uh, so could have been better, sure, but it could have been a lot worse compared to a lot of those games. For those who are curious, Nico did finish 16 for 26, 163 yards and a touchdown. No picks. He did get sacked one time for -4 yards. Uh, so there you go. Gaston Moore 4 for 9 for 36 yards on the year. Um, and then looking at the rushing numbers, congratulations to Jalen Wright. Becomes the first player since Jalen Hurd to rush for 1,000 yards in a season. Happy for him. 137 carries for 1,013 yards. Uh, Average 7.4 yards per carry, 4 touchdowns on the year. So awesome job for him. Jabari Small in his final year, 95 carries, 475 yards for 2 touchdowns, average 5 yards a carry. Dylan Sampson, 471 yards on the ground for 86 carries, 5.5 yards on average with 7 touchdowns. Milton had 7 touchdowns rushing on 78 carries, 299 yards. Obviously, his average is going to be lower since he got sacked quite a bit. Cameron Selden, 12 carries, 51 yards, and then just a variety of other people. Squirrel White led the team in receiving this year, 64 catches, 764 yards, 2 touchdowns, 11 yards per catch. Ramel Keaton, uh, who had the highest average per catch at 18 a game, 32 catches for 591, 6 touchdowns. McCallum Castles, who really, I guess has kind of been one of the surprise players on offense. He finished the team third in receiving for 21 catches, 265 yards, 4 touchdowns. Dante Thornton Jr. finished fourth in receptions, even though he was very limited. But man, but for those 2 weeks there, he was on fire. 13 catches, 224 yards, 1 touchdown, average 17 yards per catch, and of course, Brew McCoy finished fifth. And man, I think Brew could have really had a big number or a big year if it wasn't for that injury against South Carolina. 17 catches, 217 yards, and a touchdown. Jacob Warren, 15 catches, 182 yards for a touchdown. Chaz Nimrod had 17 catches. Dylan Sampson had 17 catches out of the backfield. That's really very promising down the stretch. Same thing with Jalen Wright. Personally, I think Jalen Wright's probably going to head to the NFL next year. I think he's got enough numbers to go pro, but we shall see. Um, and then kind of some backups are following them. Charles Campbell did not miss an extra point so far. Knock on wood. He was 44 on 44 on extra points, 18 for 23 on field goals. Although there's about 2 or 3 field goals he probably shouldn't have kicked. There was just some questionable decision making on that. And then Turbyville, he had 1 extra point, which I believe that was in the Vanderbilt game. So that's kind of look at the offense there. As far as totals go, Tennessee was 4th in the SEC in total offense, 8th in passing, 2nd in rushing, 8th in receiving, 7th in the SEC in points per game. So obviously a significant drop compared to last year, but still, in the most part in the upper echelon of the SEC, except for passing and receiving. So we'll see what's going to happen. And of course, last year Tennessee was very balanced, obviously, but those passing yardage was just through the roof with Hendon Hooker, and then you took a step back with Milton, but then Tennessee really developed a nice rushing attack and finished second in the league in rushing. Phil says should have a reasonable class next, depending on who's coming back. Can't figure why Hype didn't play Dylan much more. Dylan comes back next year. Yeah, that, and I think that's kind of one of the question marks. We're praising Jalen Wright for the 1,000 yards, and rightfully he deserves it. But yeah, Dylan Sampson, in my opinion, was definitely the most consistent running back we had, all year. And the Florida game, you look back, didn't play at all, and posted something on his social media about that being an animal in the cage, and then he goes out the next week and ends up having a great game. Um, and then had kind of a more solid run, but still, you really wish you had Dylan Sampson carry the load a little bit more. I mean, he finished 21st in the SEC in rushing, and behind his teammate Jabari Small, who was 20th. So I really wanted to see Wright and Sampson get the carries more than Small, and I love Jabari Small, and I understand he's a senior too, and he's capable. But Sampson is your future, and he's going to be your number one. In my opinion, you're going to be your number one back next year because, like I said, I think Wright's going to the league. Um, so yeah, definitely, that's one of those kind of those question marks at the end of the year too. And then looking at the defensive side on the year, at times was good and times was ugly, kind of, for the most part. But Elijah Herring finished the team in tackles, 75 tackles this year. Aaron Beasley was second with 67. And I was kind of disappointing a little bit with Aaron Beasley. Uh, kind of hearing from my sources, it seemed like Aaron Beasley was frustrated with his role throughout the season, flipping from different linebacker positions and kind of playing different positions. Seemed like there was some, frustration and probably not giving his all for the most part. And I really thought, man, he's going to be our leader on the defense, and it just didn't transition to the year. Um, Jason watching along says secondary was awful all year, and right behind them was the linebackers, and indeed, and I agree with you on Jason on that. Um, looking at the linebackers first, Keenan Peely getting hurt early on the year had a lot of promise coming in. Really, you don't know what you would expect, and then you threw some young guys out there with Elijah Herring. Yeah, he led the team in tackles, but at times he was just missing in action. I thought T. Lander really stepped up big towards the end of the season. I really like what he did, and then just kind of a variety of different people. And then the secondary, like you said, was awful. You know, Willie Martinez. I hope with all these coaching. New coaches getting new jobs and looking for position coaches. I would definitely suggest Willie Martinez somebody to kind of pick him up as a secondary coach. He deserves it. I'm just if you got to make a change, that's where you got to make the change. I mean, it's been terrible. I mean, I would say probably Kamal Haddon had an improved season in the secondary before he got hurt in that Alabama game with that kind of that freak injury. But he did have a really nice highlight of the year with the pick six against South Carolina right before the half. That was really nice. And yeah, it was just it was a rotation of corners and safeties, and we kind of expected it, and it just reared his ugly head. So, and I just don't get why some of these young freshmen didn't challenge some of these veterans that just hog up these positions that are not doing much nothing. James Pierce Jr. had a great season from Tracy. Absolutely. James Pierce Jr., in my opinion, has been the big breakout star this year. James Pierce Jr., he's definitely going to be an all SEC player. or all SEC team. Could be All American. We'll see. Depends on how it goes. But he finished second in the SEC in sacks with 9 this year. Very happy for him. I was not expecting much from him, to be honest with you. I thought he'd get some playing time, but yeah, he just really broke out. I think he's just a sophomore, so he'll be back next year. Can't wait to see what he'll do. I think Tyler Barron, he had a great year too. I was interested. I was, back in the summer, I heard he really matured uh, as far as his performance goes. Uh, so I'm happy that he had a great year, and I think he played himself into the league. Phil, I'll get to Jason's comment in just a second. Phil said, "Where's Brad? Haven't heard from Brad tonight." I'm not sure where Brad is tonight. I know it's the holidays coming up, and I think he's probably doing something there. And of course, uh, I don't want to reveal too much of his personal life, but this time of year with his job is also kind of busy too. So he may be he's occupied tonight, but we'll try to get Brad back on Vol Society Live in the meantime. But I know he's doing well, but I hadn't really got to talk to him this week either. Jason said I would take all 4 of our D lines back, guys back. Yeah, me too. I love what Rodney Gardner has done this year with our defensive line. Just kind of really been the bright spot of this defense, and could have been really, really bad this year. But looking at the sack numbers are just great. I mean, we talked about Pierce. Actually, he's got 8.5 sacks. I thought he had 9. So that was on me. Tyler Barron, 6 sacks. Omar Norman Lott came from Arizona State, had a great season for us, 5.5 sacks. Beasley had 3, which he's considered a linebacker. Joshua Josephs, I think, can have a breakout season next year. He ended up with 3 sacks, 18 tackles on the year. Karat Garland, 2 sacks on the year. So the sack numbers are there. I mean, we were getting to the quarterbacks. It's just the trust from Tim Banks to release these guys and get to them. I mean, could have been a whole lot more if we would have dialed up the pressure in some of these bigger games, but times we did and times we didn't. Haven't done our shout outs yet, so shout out to Heather, Michael, Gregory, Sarah, my dad, Scott, my grandmother, and Jason, leaving us a like on the Facebook page. But and then as far as the SEC numbers go, I think I have it down here. Yeah. So Tennessee was 5th in the SEC this year in tackles, 3rd in sacks. By the way, Georgia was 11th in sacks this year. So very interesting there, with Georgia being kind of that uh, elite defense. I mean, yeah, they lost a lot of playmakers on that defensive line, but I was shocked to see Georgia finish 11th in sacks this year. And then, the secondary was awful. Tennessee finished 10th in the SEC in interception. Toby watching us tonight, giving us a basketball score right out of there. Toby's going Tennessee 77, North Carolina 70 in basketball. We'll talk about hoops before we get out of here tonight. Heather saying interesting stat. Yeah, I was kind of surprised by that too. I mean, now looking at the rest of the total offense and total defenses, Georgia's right up there in about every other category, and Bama's up there, and even Texas A&M, despite the season they had some pretty solid numbers for the most part. So it'll be interesting to see what Mike Elko can do down the stretch. But that's kind of, that's just kind of a thoughts going through my head. Overall, I thought this season, I put too much stock into this season, to be honest with you. I had us going 10-2. Again, I'm thinking, man, we're going to be unstoppable. And I put too much trust into it. And then, my colleagues, Brad and Dee's, they said 9-3, we would lose a game that we're not supposed to. And we ended up really losing 2 games we weren't supposed to. And they were right. So, but, overall, I thought, for what we lost and kind of reflecting, it could have been worse, but it could have been better. But 8-4, not a terrible year, like I said, but could have been better. Toby says, I said it last week. I'll say it again. Michigan is going to win it all. And they got a bit, and it could. They could do it. As far as I guess we'll make the transition over to kind of the playoff rankings. They announced them right before we went on the air, and Georgia, Michigan's 1 and 2. Washington now at number 3, and Florida State's at number 4. Tennessee is at 21 in the college football top 25 this week. Of course, we won't play until next month. But kind of we'll transition to those championship games. I think if Georgia wins or loses against Alabama this week, I think they're in. Um, Same thing with Michigan, Toby. I think they're gonna throttle Iowa. Iowa didn't play Michigan or Ohio State in the regular season. They played Penn State and lost 31-0 at Penn State. So I think Michigan's going to throttle them. But even if they do lose in a fluky way, I think Michigan is also in. It's going to come down to that Pac-12 championship game, Texas and Florida State, as far as the final 2 spots go. Tracy says, I see they release a partial schedule for next year. Any thoughts of it playing Oklahoma? We thank you, Tracy, for bringing it up. We posted that on Vol Society. So the SEC, mainly it's ESPN, they announced, I think it was 12 games it's like 12 or 15 games for next year that ESPN or one of the ESPN networks is going to broadcast with the new SEC TV package. And Tennessee and Oklahoma was on that list. So Tennessee's going to play Oklahoma at Oklahoma on September 21st. And I kind of knew that going in. I think we heard it back in June they were going to play at Oklahoma. I think it's interesting that that's going to be the first SEC game for us and not Florida. Florida is moved to the second Saturday in October, and then Alabama follows that up. So interesting how they had that situation set up, and this will also be for Oklahoma's first SEC game in their conference history is against us. I believe they get a cup. Oklahoma schedule. They play Houston, I believe, in week 1. Then there's a cupcake game, and then Tulane, and then us. And then for Tennessee, we open the season next August against Chattanooga at home. Then we go to Charlotte that following week and play NC State, and then I believe Kent State's the following week at home, and then we go to Oklahoma. So, interesting to see part of the schedule being released. I heard that they're going to release the full schedule right before the bowl games get going. So, obviously, if we hear anything, we'll definitely post y'all here on Ball Society. But I'm as far as like playing Oklahoma goes, with us, them and Texas joining, eventually we had to play one of them, and going to Oklahoma is going to be interesting. I think Oklahoma's trending up. Now, I'm not going to make a win-loss prediction for 2024 because I got to see how, who's coming back, who's hitting the transfer portal, who's going to the draft, the incoming freshmen. So I'm not going to make a win-loss record, but if you want to look at a forecast going forward, probably Tennessee's probably going to be steady going into 2024. A lot of new faces coming in. Then Oklahoma, I think, can be trending up somewhat, although this is going to be a challenge for them. They got a really tough SEC schedule compared to Texas. I do remember seeing that. Phil says, I believe Florida State will win it all. I believe so, too. We'll see how their backup did. He helped them get the win against Florida. So we'll see how Rodmaker will do in the ACC championship game against Louisville. Toby says Georgia versus Michigan for it all, and I think it probably will happen. We'll see who the other two will be in the semifinals. Of course, this is the last year of the 14 playoff, and next year it jumps to 12, and 2024 is going to be a different look for college football with the Pac-12 officially going to be gone, with half the conference going to either the Big 12 or the Big 10. You got the expanded playoffs. You got Oklahoma, Texas joining the SEC. You got Well, actually, I forgot Stanford and Cal going to the ACC themselves, which makes all sense in the world. The two Pacific Coast teams in the Atlantic Coast Conference, along with SMU. So it's uh, it's going to be an interesting season next year, just in college football in general, not necessarily through Tennessee. Toby says Florida State is overrated. Oh, uh, I think I really like Florida State this year. I, but when they had Jordan Travis at quarterback, and now with his injury, I think it's going to be an interesting challenge with Louisville. Louisville coming off a loss to Kentucky this past Saturday, lost by 7, but Jeff Brom got this team playing for the most part playing well. And Louisville didn't get to, or Louisville hasn't played Florida State or Clemson this year. They dropped the division plays. Normally they would play them every year, but they avoided them, and they kind of went on a great run for Jeff Brom in his first year at his alma mater. So we'll see how that ACC championship game will go. Trying to see what else is going on, but yeah, I mean, as far as Atlanta goes on Saturday, Georgia and Alabama, you know, like I said, I think Georgia's probably going to win it for the most part. I think they are really clicking on all cylinders, but Alabama does have some momentum. I mean, both teams had kind of flat performances on Saturday against their big rivals, especially Alabama had to win it on a miracle on that 4th and goal, that 31-yard touchdown pass from from Milrow to Isaiah Bond, and I was just so happened to leave the Tennessee Vanderbilt game and got back on the school bus going back to where I was parked at, and when I saw that touchdown happen, so it was a pretty wild game uh, at, down in Auburn, and then Auburn just completely just was in shock and awe and couldn't do anything at the end, and threw a pick six, and that sealed the win up for Alabama. And then Georgia and Georgia Tech. Georgia had kind of a flat performance against Georgia Tech, but they sealed out with a win. Um, Going to be an interesting SEC championship game on Saturday. To me, if Georgia, in my opinion, if Georgia does take a loss this year, I think it will be Saturday in Atlanta. Now, I think Georgia will win. Don't let me clarify that. But if there is a chance they would lose, I think Saturday's probably their best chance of them losing. Because going into the playoffs, I don't really see a team that scares Georgia, including Michigan. I know Toby says Michigan's going to win it all, and they could. They can win it all, but like I said, if they go up against Washington, I think they can shut down Michael Penix in that offense. Definitely Florida State with the backup. Texas, I think they can handle them fairly nicely. I mean, Michigan may be their best shot, because you got two defensive minded teams for the most part. So, but we'll see what happens there. Um, so that's kind of just some of my overall thoughts. Like I said, we'll find out Sunday who we will play in the bowl game. Going from there. All right, before we get out of here, we'll talk a little Tennessee basketball. Uh, big doubleheader for both the men's and women's basketball teams, part of the SEC ACC Challenge. The first year that they've started that up. The Lady Vols playing Notre Dame at 5 o'clock at Thompson-Boling Arena. Lady Vols coming back from Fort Myers, where they lost to Indiana in the first game, and then they ended up coming from behind last Saturday and defeated Oklahoma to seal that up. So a big win for Kelly there because she needed it badly. And now they take on Notre Dame at home. Should be a pretty good atmosphere. And then for the men, taking on North Carolina, Tar Heels are a 1.5-point favorite tomorrow night at the Dean Smith Center. North Carolina, number 17 in the country, 5-1 on the year. Their only loss was to Villanova down at the Battle for Atlantis, but they ended up defeating Arkansas last Friday, and now they get ready to take on us. Looking at some of the key players to watch out for the Tar Heels, we start with the leading scorer, R.J. Davis, 18 points per game, 3 rebounds, shooting 42% from the field. 3-point percentage around 31%. A very good free throw shooter, shooting at 91% from the free throw line. Uh, and then you got Baycott, Armando Baycott, returning back, feels like for his 10th year at Chapel Hill, averaging 15 points a game, 11 rebounds, shooting 51% from the field. Uh, he can knock it down from 3-point land, 33%, 85% free throw shooter. So that's the two guys you're going to have to really watch out on tomorrow night. Others, Harrison Ingram, I think is going to be another key factor Tennessee's going to have to watch out for. He's averaging around 14 points per game. So this is going to be a tough North Carolina team we're facing, but I think Tennessee can rise to the challenge. I'm loving what Dalton Knecht is still doing, averaging the team in points, 17 points per game. I mean, Tennessee's already kind of played some big games so far. I mean, we saw it last Tuesday against Purdue and then the next day against Kansas. But I think, with a lot of sports fans that probably casually watches college basketball that's transitioning from football into basketball, this is a perfect opportunity for really the entire nation or, a lot of sports fans to see what Dalton Knecht has done so far for this Tennessee basketball team. Tennessee was desperately needed some offense and some scoring, a go-to guy, and we found this kid from Northern Colorado, and he's really done a nice job for us. Averages 17 points a game, 4 rebounds, shooting 37% from 3-point land, 45% field goal shooting. I mean, just doing a nice job. And even Jordan Gainey, we got to give a shout out to Jordan Gainey, another transfer from USC Upstate, averaging 11 points per game. He's another go-to scorer for this Tennessee team. So, yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting game. Tough, playing at the Dean Smith Center is always tough to play. North Carolina, a mega brand name in college basketball. So, Tennessee. I think the last time Tennessee played there, we ended up losing to North Carolina at their place. But hey, should be a fun game tomorrow night. Rick Barnes has played North Carolina many a times, especially when his time at Clemson when he was the head coach a long time ago. But should be, like I said, should be a lot of fun. I hadn't caught some of the opening night SEC ACC challenge games, but this replaces the SEC Big 12 challenge and the ACC Big 10 challenge from years gone by. But two good conferences, and more with some Southern ties to it, if you will. I know there's some teams up in the north in the ACC, but some good basketball kind of as we're now transitioning from football into basketball. And, and even me, I love watching college basketball as much as I love watching college football. And I'm excited to see what this team can do. Tennessee, had kind of a okay Maui Invitational, got the win over Syracuse, and then took number 2 Purdue to the limit uh, in that last Tuesday night, and then Wednesday afternoon ended up losing to number 1 Kansas. Was hanging in there with them up until about the last 10 minutes of the game, and then we couldn't hit nothing, and Kansas ran away with it. But the Vols are 4-2 right now, still in the top, still in the top 10 in the latest AP poll. So, didn't fall too far. And I didn't think we would either, losing to the top 2 teams. I didn't think we would take a complete nosedive down. But I think this is a game Tennessee needs to get tomorrow night. Um, kind of still hanging that top 10 because, you still got some good opportunities and some great games coming up, especially on December the 9th when you host Illinois. But I think Tennessee kind of needs to go in there and sneak a win out against North Carolina. But it should be a lot of fun, the Vols and the Tar Heels tomorrow night. All right, that's going to wrap it up with Vol Society Live. Like I said, we will post on the Facebook page when we're going to do another Vol Society Live. Obviously, we'll find out Sunday night where Tennessee will be playing in the bowl game. Thank you, Tracy, for watching along with us. Like I said, we'll post it sometime. Good night, Phil. We'll post it on the Facebook page. Also, before you guys head out of here, beginning this weekend, we are going to start the Vol Society Year-End Award. So look for that on the Facebook page. This is your chance to vote for who's who is the Vol of the Year, the Lady Vol of the Year, the Coach of the Year, the Game of the Year, and the Breakout Star of the Year. This is the third year in a row we've done it. So keep an eye on the Facebook page and the nominees and your chance to vote, and have a little fun as we wrap up another year, which is crazy to think 2023 is almost done. But we're done right now. We thank you for joining us on Vol Society Live. Tailgate Thursday will be coming up this Thursday at noon, as we'll just preview all the championship games. And yeah, we'll catch you next time right here on Vol Society Live. This is David Morrison saying good night and go Vols, and thank you for being a part of Vol Society.